Hey y'all, Vanessa here, giving you your first demo. I want to start with your toolkit, either the one that you purchase or the one that you're given for the semester, giving you a rundown of what comes in the toolkit and how you can use these tools for yourself and with your art. Right here we've got the wooden potter's knife. This is a really great tool. It can be used either hand building on the wheel. For now I'm going to be specifically giving examples mostly for hand building, but hopefully later on I'll describe to you how these can be used on the wheel as well. This is really good for carving. It's really good also for smoothing the inside of something or blending coils. So I love this tool. I would say I use this most in addition to some of the rib tools when I'm hand building. So the pointed edge can be held like this, and you can like incise. You can also hold it like this with a little more pressure of your pointer finger and like kind of dig into the surface of something to like create an edge, and then you could even then put your hand on the interior and kind of push the clay out and then continue to like sculpt with this tool. It has two ends, so the pointy edge is really cool. You can go this way, this way, this way underneath, and then there's this rounded edge as well that kind of has like a hooked edge to it right here. This is really good if you wanted to like go over an eyeball or something like that and dome it out. You can use this concave surface here to then like scrape along the edge of the clay. It also has the opposing side, which is kind of nice if you wanted to do more of an indentation. The hooked edge is also really great if, like, let's say this was a seam in between two pieces of different clay. You could use this tool to then blend the seam either side. So this is really a nice tool. Kind of along the same lines, I suppose we'll do maybe most of the wooden tools because they can be used pretty similarly. You've got a smaller version like this, sometimes that comes in your kit. Depending on the one you buy, it may not have this one, but if you are thinking about being a sculptor, I would highly recommend this tool. It has a nice pointed edge for more detail work, and then it has kind of a smaller version of that scooped edge that I talked about in the wooden potter's knife. So that's another one. You have an additional wooden tool here, really a mini version of the wooden potter's knife, but with this one you can see that the edge of this is a little bit different in the sense that it's not quite as wide, and so you can get into narrower spaces. You're also, surprisingly enough, with the more narrow tools, you're going to make a larger indentation sometimes than with some of these wider, flatter tools, so that's something that you could consider. I guess in the sculpting realm, you have a needle tool as well. The needle tool is great for incising really fine line work. It's also really great for, like, sometimes I like just using the barrel of it to blend things or like highlight an edge if I want to. It can be used to write your name on the bottom of a pot. It can also be used to kind of cut. So let's say this was attached to a wheel that was spinning. I can use it like this to cut the lip of the edge and get some of the material away that maybe is uneven and level it out with this tool. So it can also be used to like poke into a solid form or maybe a form that's enclosed but has air trapped inside. You could poke a hole with this as well to release the air so your piece doesn't explode. We also have these two trimming tools for you. There's a square edge trimming tool and a loop trimming tool here. This one is great for wheel throwing, but also great for carving on the surface of something that you've created. I personally prefer using these kind of at the leather hard stage. I'll go over what the stages of clay are in just a second when I'm done describing these tools. This is your bird head trimming tool. A little bit larger. It can be held like this. It can be held like this. Speaking of holding your tools, you know, depending on where you hold it and the angle with which you approach whatever you're going to interact with, you're going to get different results. So you want to really think about how you're holding your tools and how that they're coming into contact with the form or sculpture that you are interacting with. This is a great tool. Not all of the toolkits come with this, but this is a serrated rib. I love this for hand building. It's great because you can use it to score the surface of something. You can also, let's say, here's some markings on this piece, if you can see them. It has these lines here. If you've created a piece hand built, maybe with coils, and you've got a lot of indentations that you might want to smooth out, you can kind of go in diagonal crosshatch marking and blend out like a bump, and then you can follow it up with some of the other rib tools and then plane those out and smooth them. So there's the serrated rib, there's a wooden rib as well, which is really nice, and then a lot of the time there's a plastic rubber rib, which I love as well. The nice thing about the plastic rubber rib, oh, in addition to the serrated rib, you should have a smooth version of this, and these are really great for bending and sculpting on a rounded surface or edge. Same with this rubber rib as well. You can kind of contour the rib by pushing your thumb against it and then flexing with your other fingers and then going on a rounded edge like that to kind of continue the form without collapsing it. So those are really nice. This can be used to either smooth like a slab on the flat surface, or again, it can be contoured and used around something that's rounded too. Really like both of those tools. And you can invent new ways to use the tools that maybe I'm not describing as well. This is really good for planing and compressing a slab. You can also use it to make like marks on the surface of something, or also for sculpting if you'd like. And if it's for wheel throwing, a lot of the times you're using this to kind of press against the form to flatten something or compress something out, or you're using it on the interior of the form like this. That's in another video though. Another really important tool that you have is your wire cutting tool here. I'm just gonna check that it's recording because I'm kind of nervous, so 1 sec. Okay, we're good. You know what? The less editing that I can do, the better. I really don't want to edit much of this if I can help it. So that's just not something I'm super good at. So we're gonna try and avoid it if possible. This is your wire cutting tool. It can be used to facet the surface of something. So again, imagine for just a moment that this hasn't been fired. It can be used to like facet the surface of something and shape it. It could be used to cut this form in half by pulling up. It can be used, let's say this was affixed to this banding wheel here. It could be used like this underneath it to cut the piece off of the banding wheel or the potter's wheel. And it can also be used to cut material out of your clay bag. So the wire cutting tool is also super, super handy. Do be careful though, sometimes these get crinkled and kinked, and the wires can split off and they'll like stab you in the finger, and it's super uncomfortable. And then lastly, you have your toolkit may have other tools, and if it does, just ask me and I'll be happy to go over and try and explain what they're for. But your toolkit should also have a small sponge in there too. And usually the way I like to start my setup, which is kind of what we can transition to next. I guess this is the banding wheel. The banding wheels are either looking like this, they might be plastic. Really, it's just a wheel that's spinning. I love hand building on top of these, especially if I'm seeking out symmetry and I want something to be relatively uniform. I typically like to construct on a banding wheel. Depending on where you are, sometimes they're blue and they're a little more shallow. They are an incredible tool to have. Okay, let's go into setup and how I like to get my station in order so that I feel really comfortable and have everything I need to succeed and get into an amazing flow state that doesn't get interrupted. Because man, oh man, I think my favorite thing about this is the flow state, which is difficult to describe because, you know, it's a vibe. So that's part of it. Okay, a little more water. All right. So setup, I usually get all my tools before I even get started in front of me. I like to get a bucket of water. I like to just put my little sponge in my water, boop, and I like a spray bottle. Save spray bottles from like non-toxic cleaners that you're using and just recycle them and use them in your studio, or we have some spray bottles available for you. Make sure there's water in it. People love to not fill them. Please do fill them up too if there is not water in there. Slip is something that people like to have prepared and ready for themselves as well. I usually do like a half of a bucket of water or a quarter bucket of water just because I don't want to waste much, and you don't need a ton of water when you're hand building. So it's nice to, you know, not overuse water, especially because we're in the desert and all the droughts everywhere. In the case of slab building, I also have grabbed some slats here that are the same height, I'm going to use these to make a slab that is nice and level. And then I also have grabbed a rolling pin for myself so that I can plane out the slab and make it nice and flat and uniform. I think that, and of course your clay, and of course you and your hands are the most important tools that you're going to have. All of the clay that comes fresh out of the bag, either recycled from our studios in the cases of where I'm like teaching and describing for you guys, they should come so that they're vacuumed and there's not any air pockets in them. Once you grab a piece of the vacuumed clay and you start to manipulate it and you start to fold it in on itself, you end up embedding, I think I was gonna say impregnating, I mean that's right too, but you end up embedding air pockets trapped inside of the clay. And when you cut the clay open, what you see are some like little air holes in there. What's problematic about that and what you want to avoid in this class or anytime you're working with this material is air trapped inside of it with no escape. So if there's air trapped inside of a form and there's no escape, essentially what happens is when you put the piece of clay into the kiln for the first time, it is not only losing like visible water, it's also losing chemical water. And so as that chemical water tries to evaporate and escape from the confines of the clay surface, there's nowhere for it to go. And so you get a steam bomb essentially that builds up in your piece and it explodes. So you're okay to just grab clay out of your bag, but after you've used it once and you've manipulated it in such a way that you've introduced air, after that you need to reserve a separate pile. All of this can be recycled many times, and I would encourage you to look at this as a resource that is very worthy of recycling and being very, very conservative with, because these materials can take millions to thousands of years to form. So although it's renewable, it kind of is not in a lot of ways, and it's definitely not renewable in our lifetime. So I think that it's really important as a teacher to talk about the preciousness of the material and what you're working with and its history and its importance too. So make sure that you're reserving your materials to the side in another bag that you bring, or one that we have extra, and you're preparing them to be recycled later on. To recycle your materials, what you can do is a process called wedging. So let's say I had a series, and wedging is pretty, I don't know, people make it look really easy, but in all honesty, when I was first getting started, I thought wedging was so hard. And so if you feel like wedging is really hard, you're not alone. I'm gonna just take all of these little bits and bobs and kind of put them together. I would say if you're gonna try wedging, you want to make sure that you have enough that's like 2 spheres of clay that fit comfortably in the palms of your hands together. So like that's like a pretty decent little chunk of clay. Anything smaller than that, it's pretty uncomfortable. Anything much larger than that, if you don't have the strength yet, it's gonna be a little bit hard. Speaking of setup, you've got your tools, you've got your other things, you've got your clay. I also really like having like a little towel, like a microfiber towel or a cotton towel just around, so I'm not using paper towels all the time and I can just reuse this over and over again. If you're gonna practice wedging, and this can just be like a baby introduction, you don't have to think of this as the end-all be-all opportunity of wedging. I'll show you in person too. I like to kind of spray the surface of my work area. Most of the time, at least in the studios I teach at, we're working on top of concrete board. You may not be working on top of concrete board, but if you are, definitely hydrating the surface before working on it is super important. Because if you don't, what happens is this gets really, really dry and it cracks a lot. So, you know, speaking of water, I think in the earlier parts of the video I was talking about the collaboration, and if I haven't, your material, ceramic clay, is in a deep and loving and serious and long-term relationship with water. And how much water you use, how little water you use can directly impact the consistency of the material, and therefore that will impact the results that you get. So you have to be constantly thinking and evaluating how much water you need or don't need in a certain situation. My typical approach, especially with hand building when I'm first getting started, is think about hydrating the material not directly, but through like your hands being a little bit wet like this and having a little slip on them and then interacting with the material. Or if you're gonna add a little bit of water, don't think of like grabbing a huge sponge full and like putting it on there. Instead, think of like a gentle mist like that with your spray bottle. If you add too much water, what happens with the material is it's gonna get so soft that it's going to collapse and it's not going to be able to hold and maintain its structure. You'll know that it's too soft if it's really slippy and slick. And also, like if you were to make a little coil like this and you were to try and kind of stand it up like that, it would start to collapse and kind of melt away. So those are some good indicators. You'll also know if it's not enough water, if it's really stiff in your hands, if it's really hard to manipulate, probably means your clay is too dry. If it starts to just kind of crack or have like these hairline fissure cracks on it, also means that you probably need to hydrate. So to wedge, what I like to do is I like to put my hands on the top, and I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, so just bear with me. There's a lot to get into this one video. You can take a break if you need to. I need a break already, I can't. There's a lot to put in this video, but it's a nice resource to have in case you miss a day or something like that, or if you just need additional sources to absorb the content. So to wedge, what I like to do is I like to create kind of like a hot dog bun shape or something that's a little bit higher instead of super low. And then I personally like to have my right leg forward and my left leg backward. I also like to put my thumbs on the top like this and then gently clasp the clay. The majority of the work is being done by like this part of your palm right here. And the way that I like to describe the action of pushing is almost like pushing down and away in disgust, like you're like, ooh, no. And then you're bringing the clay back up. It's not a strength game, it's more a repetition game. I think people think that like if they just force the clay down firmly enough, it's going to extract and push out all the air. It's more so about the spiraling that's about to occur and the spiraling multiple times and the mixing of the clay that is more important than the sheer force of like pushing the clay out. So this is called spiral wedging or ram's head wedging. Actually, spiral wedging is a little different shape. That one's a little harder, but also very beneficial because you can do more clay. But for now, we'll just talk about the ram head wedging. Anyways, you're gonna want to push this away, bring it back up on the nose, and you'll start to see this is developing like a little curve to it right here. And you're also gonna notice that these little indentations are forming as well. So I push it away, bring it back up to the nose, slightly leaning towards my body. I put my hands directly back on top. I push away again, I come forward, and I start to engage my pinkies like this on the side. If it starts to get really wide, it means that you're not engaging this part of your palm right here and your pinkies enough to kind of hold on to the clay. And then you just want to spiral it at least 20 times. And the more you do it, you're gonna start noticing, you're gonna either feel bubbles coming out, you're gonna start noticing these little flaps that are emerging. Those are really good indicators and signs that you're physically spiraling the clay and you're mixing it and you're ensuring that there's some little air pockets coming out of the sides. So I'm gonna continue kind of spiraling this. I usually say about 20 times minimum rotations around in order to get your clay properly mixed. It gets to this point where you want to finish off your wedging and make sure that these sides are more homogeneous. So what I like to do is I like to kind of tilt this up on its side, and instead of pressing with both hands, I just like to push into the table and spiral it into a cone like that, and then tap that cone tip down and then flip it on the other side as well. Some potters, I know we're kind of primarily talking about hand building in this class, but some potters will make sure to remember what direction the spiral was, because if you put it on the wheel and it goes the opposing direction, sometimes it unwinds a little bit and it's not as pleasant to throw with. So once you have it in a nice ball like this, then you can kind of tap it. When I'm making a sphere, I kind of cup my hand like this and keep pushing it into my hand by just kind of throwing it in there and rotating. You can check it to see if there's any air pockets left in it by cutting it in half. And then if I'm kind of new, I'll just kind of pull it a little bit like that. And if you do have something like that that emerges, I hope you guys can see that. It probably means that maybe you could have spun it around a few more times, but you can also just kind of tap it into place like this and work it to the point that you need to. So here's this, 2 new pieces, all cleaned up and done. And we're ready to go. Okay, so I did just grab a new piece because those were getting a little firm for my liking for the pinch bowl that I'm about to show you. But if you wanted to, a lot of you have a cube, you guys could unwrap the clay box or bag, clay rectangle, and then you could take this tool instead and kind of cut it like so, and then grab a piece of clay instead of trying to claw at it and create more air pockets. Sometimes I recommend that. So we're gonna move into the pinch demo, and what I'm gonna show you is a little pinch bowl. So I've got this little piece here. This was a pinch bowl that I made for a demonstration. At first it started like a little hemisphere shape, and then I added a foot to it with a coil, and then I added a little spout to it. I was thinking, you know, I could make like, I could make nothing because I just broke it, almost. But I was thinking I could crack my eggs in here if I wanted to, or like make little mixtures and then pour them out. So when you are first learning to make your pinch bowls, I want you to really think about, you know, either making them really intentional and really defining and observing the way that you're treating the lip, the body, and the foot. So with functional wear, utilitarian pieces, as a designer, I always want you to think about those 3 elements and how they're interacting with one another. Alternatively to that, if you don't want to add additional components like this, just make sure that you are really skillfully doing the 3 things and defining them that I just described. So for a pinch bowl, I want everyone to kind of make the same bowls to start, just so that you get the practice. 1, if your bowl isn't working, don't keep it. That's like the first thing that I wanted to mention. If it doesn't look good, it's not working, just crumple it up. The great thing about the material is it can be recycled, and I would really encourage you to think about it like that and to recognize that repetition is so important with this material. I only assign you for the class that you're in a few pieces, but what I expect is that you're making a much larger amount than those, and that the ones that you present in the long run are your best versions of something. So kind of keep that in mind as far as my expectation. So for a pinch bowl, you're going to take your clay and you're gonna pat it in your hand until you get a nice sphere of clay. And then once you have a sphere, you want something that fits comfortably in the palms of your hands like this. You can wrap both the hands around it. If it's any smaller than that, might be too little, but again, it's what you want to make, right? So the amount of clay is dependent on what you want to make. We're going for something that holds like a cup or 2 of liquid, or whatever you want to call it, hopefully ice cream, honestly. You're going to hold your piece of clay in your hand, and you're going to start burrowing down with your thumb. You can either hold with your left hand and burrow down with your right hand, or vice versa. Just depends on what your dominant hand is. I am right-handed, so I'm burrowing down with my right hand. And I'm also rotating this as I burrow down. What I'm going for is, I want a 1/4 inch wall thickness throughout the entire bowl that I'm making. So I'm going to use my needle tool, and I'm going to push through the bottom, and then I'm going to follow down with my finger. You guys can kind of see how I followed down with my finger. It's not going all the way through, I can just see the tip of the needle tool. I'm going to push my finger against the needle, and then I'm going to pull out the needle to kind of see how much material I have left at the foot, or at the base of it. And right now you can see that there is a 1/4 inch available to me at the bottom. I know that there's a hole in there, but by the time you're done compressing, you're not even gonna know it's there. So once you have that done, then you're gonna start physically pinching the rest of the material around to expand it and create that hemisphere that I talked about. I like to start at the bottom personally, but if you want to start at the top, what I think is most important when you're pinch building is the proximity of each of your pinches to one another. Like you don't, if you're looking for uniformity throughout the wall, you don't want to be bouncing around like from here to then the back or anything like that. You want to really think of yourself as going in rings all the way around and then stepping up to the next ring all the way around, stepping up to the next ring all the way around. And your pinches should be like a 1/4 inch close to each other, in my opinion. So you guys can kind of see quickly, nice light pinches. You also don't want to pinch with, in my opinion, everyone's different, but personally, I think that you don't like to pinch with the tips of your fingers. Instead, you guys can kind of see where the imprint from the water is on my fingers. I'm using more of like my entire finger to expand the material. So I'm gonna go all the way around. Oh my gosh, you guys, the air conditioning is out here and I am dying. It is hot. And I decided to wear a sweater. Lunatic. I'm actually so hot that I'm just gonna walk over here and grab a paper towel, excuse me, and dab off my face because this is ridiculous. Whew. Oh my gosh. Wow. Toasty, toasty, toasty. Okay, so I also am trying, when I'm hand building at least, I'm not trying to go from 0 to 60. I don't expect the form to completely reveal itself after like 2 actions, 3 actions, 10 actions. The revelation of what you're trying to make, in my opinion, again, and it's dependent on what form you're creating and whatnot, but in my opinion, you want to think of the development of the form in clay specifically as like an onion, the layers of the onion. It's going to unfold progressively and through the multiple stages of the clay, right? So I think I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about the stages of clay. So there's a plastic stage, which is the clay that comes right out of your bag. It's really soft. And then as the clay starts to dry, it hardens because the water is evaporating, right? And so you get a structure that's much firmer. And what happens with that structure is it's almost like the shell of it starts to get a little firmer. It holds its shape a little better and you're able to more gradually and subtly expand the shape. You're also able to like cut into it and dart it and fold it over without it collapsing. So you need to become really proficient in the observation of the stages of clay in order to assess when it is the right time to do certain things. So that's just food for thought. Going back to this and that comment that I just made, I have only fleshed this out maybe 20% of what I want eventually, maybe more like 30% of what I want eventually, right? Because I'm just going for a basic hemisphere. The thickness, I didn't try to make it a 1/4 inch right away. I am going right now for more of a 1/2 inch, and that's what I have. So you can see there's a little bit of cracking that's starting to develop right here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just take a little bit of water. My hands are getting kind of dry. Take a little water, kind of put it on my hands. And now what I'm gonna do, instead of going bottom to top, I'm gonna go top to bottom. And I'm gonna pinch just a little bit more gently. And I'm gonna start looking at areas of the form. I'm also starting to lose access to the bottom in here with the length of my fingers. So I'm okay just using my thumb pressed against my hand to continue expanding that. So this, right, it's nothing, I mean, it's lovely. I love hand built. I love the simplicity of a certain object. Simplicity and minimalism can be great. I think speaking to the touch of the hand and maintaining the integrity of that is also a beautiful thing, but it's not anything to like be thrilled about, right? It's not exactly what I'd want in the long term. I'll tell you what I'm really not looking for with the pinch pots is ashtrays. Like, please do not. We want to maintain the curvature on the bottom. And so what I need to do now in order to make this more of a hemisphere shape, right now it's more egg. What's really cool about this, I know I'm sidestepping a little bit, but pinch method, I'm going to show you 3 different methods today. I know a lot of information. Feel free to digest it as you like. The cool thing about a pinch pot is it can also be more than just a pinch bowl. Like you could put two of these together and then you have like an egg form, which is very similar and reminiscent to many animal heads or human heads, and you could sculpt that. So it doesn't always have to be a functional object. You can ask yourself how you could use these little pinch vessels to then make like mini sculpture as well. Or depending on how big your hands are, like you might be able to make a larger form, but for me, they're gonna be pretty petite, so. Okay, I'm going through now, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at my bowl and I'm seeing where irregularities are occurring that I'm not necessarily that into. So I can see I have a line right here that I want to assess. I'm probably going to get my tools involved at this point. What I'm going to do, I love using the heel of this, or if I had my rib tool that wasn't serrated, I would use that as well. I like to kind of use the heel of this on the inside. I don't know if you guys can see me kind of swiping up and out, and I'm spot treating that edge that I was mentioning, kind of a fourth of the way up from the base that kind of needs to be expanded, and that I wish was a little bit more of like a hemisphere shape. So here I am swiping upward. You could swipe to the side. It's up to you how you want to do that. But I really want the bottom of this to be pretty voluminous. I want there to be some density at the base of this. So I'm spending some time with the tool that's the right shape, kind of expanding it. And now you can see I've got a humble little bowl shape that has begun to emerge. At this stage, I've expanded it. You can check the wall thickness similarly to the base by kind of stabbing the side of it with the needle tool and then pushing it out and seeing how much you have available right there. That's about a 1/4 inch wall thickness throughout. So before I give it a little breather and allow it to just rest and firm up so that when I add the foot, I don't have to worry too much about it collapsing or distorting. I'm going to just make sure I have this thinned out just a little bit more and that the general shape is pretty close to what I want. Maybe 85% what I want in the final outcome of the bowl. Don't worry too much about smoothing. If you've got some little jagged edges in there from the tool, you can just blend it with your finger. But again, you can see I haven't really used much water, right? I'm gonna use a teeny tiny bit of water just on the lip because I'm getting a tiny bit of cracking. And I'm just kind of pinching and swiping to blend. So you can just blend with the tip of your finger, smooth it. Usually when I blend, I like to go kind of one direction, so I'm just rotating the pot around. So hot in here. Oh my gosh. I'm redoing this video from an old one that I had that was truly not great. It was not that good of a video. And I was like thinking, conditions are perfect. I'm in the mood. I'm highly caffeinated. I am ready to make this demo online. It's not online, it's on my phone, but it's eventually gonna be online. And here I am. It's so hot and uncomfortable. Okay, when you have it pretty much where you want it, you could put it to the side, and sometimes I'll use this little tool to like paddle if I want to change the form. Upside down is a really nice way to look at your bowl because you get a little more access to what's going on. So sometimes I'll kind of crouch down and see what's going on, give it a little tap tap where I want it. But for the most part, like that is okay to just set to the side, let it firm up a bit. I'm gonna get my little napkin guy. Okay, it's good to firm up. And what we're gonna do in the meantime is I'm gonna show you how to make coils, and we're gonna start a form like this. So your second thing that you're gonna wanna make that I'm requiring is an exaggerated form. To me, an exaggerated form, I mean, I know that sounds broad and it definitely is, but kind of a base shape is what we're going for. But I definitely want you to think about how like the lip of this is interacting with the base of it. The tapering of the neck right here is similar tapering right here. So there is definitely some undulations that are occurring on the form that I think are visually engaging. So how could you do that with your pot? You could make this exact form. This is a really good form to do because you're forced to go narrow to wide to narrow to wide. And that's an excellent practice for when you're first getting started with quail building. So for now, let's just say for the purposes of what I'm hoping for, everybody make kind of this shape, pretty close to it. To start that, you can start with a slab base, or you can start with a little pinch pot base too. Either or is good. Indigenous people have these really lovely little pre-fired bowls that they make a shallow bowl in, and then they coil off of those, and they act very similarly to these banding wheels. So there's some really cool videos of Maria Martinez, the artist, working with those molds. For me, and so that I can get you kind of pre-prepped for making a slab, I'm going to take one of these small pieces here. You don't need a lot of clay. If you're making a slab, as with anything, you can use a lot of clay or a little clay. For us, we're just going to use a little bit of clay. The primary thing with a slab is how you throw out the slab. So there are ways to do it. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just up and down, flattening it out like so. But if you're trying to, this might not be enough, I think it's going to be enough clay. But if you're trying to expand and drag a slab out, and a lot of the times you'll hear people refer to it as throwing a slab out, what you want to do is when you release the piece of clay onto, it might take me a second to get into them, but when you release the clay onto the tabletop, there we go. You're really trying to flick the clay. I think we need a little water to make it a tiny bit more tacky. When you add the water, again, you want to let it kind of absorb a bit. When you really, oh, that's better. When you release it, did you kind of hear, you heard how it wasn't very loud and it just kind of sounded like a, that's the sound you want to hear, and you can see how it's expanding. You can switch the direction then if you want to as well. That's a really great way to throw out a slab. It's just kind of flicking it and allowing gravity to kind of drag the clay. You can use slabs for a bunch of different things. I could use this piece and I could make a handle. So like this is a handle on a slab pot that I made. The form is made of a slab, the base is made of a slab as well. And slabs are really great to decorate on before or after you build with them. A lot of people will like do scroll stamps on a slab, and that's pretty awesome. But we're talking just about preparing a slab. So in addition to throwing out the slab, you would think, oh, I'm done, I don't need to do anything else. But whenever you work with slabs, I would highly encourage you to compress them really thoroughly on both sides. So what I'm gonna do before I compress it on both sides is I'm gonna level it out. I wanna make sure that this is pretty even. So I'm gonna use the slats on both sides, and then I'm gonna use my rolling pin and I'm gonna go over it, and I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna do that on the other side as well. And once you have it leveled out, what you can do is, and that might take more work than what I just showed you, depending on how much material you are working with. I like to personally always dip my wooden tools in water. So I dipped this in water, and I like that because it just slides along the clay a little better, and it also rehydrates it slightly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of swipe. I like to go a lot of different directions. Some studios have what are called slab rollers. Both of the studios I work at do have them, and I use them pretty often when I'm making really large slabs. But a lot of people are firm believers in hand throwing your slabs. The reason for that, and I didn't mention this at the beginning of the video, but this is really important information. So your clay, one of its very favorite things in addition to water is compression. So clay particles are a very specific shape, and they like to be distributed, like, you know, when you shuffle cards and you're not doing it like this and stacking them on top, you're just putting them on the tabletop and you're rubbing them and moving them around like that. All of those, you want to imagine the platelets of clay as those cards. If they're they're layered in such like a diverse way, you're going to have more structural strength. Like if you were to then take that, imagine you were able to like remove the cards that have been shuffled in a plane in the slab. If you were to try and bend it, it's going to be a lot harder to bend it and break it because of the way that those are so randomly dispersed than if you were to stack everything like perfectly along each other, the lines along each other where there's several seams like this. So in a slab roller, you only go through like this one direction. But when you're throwing out your slab, the clay particles are kind of getting moved all around. So some people are purists and they really believe that you should only kind of throw out your slabs. You know, I like both. So I like both. Also, a slab roller is expensive. It's an expensive piece of equipment that a lot of people won't have access to. You know, some people also make slabs with the big cube of clay. They have a really cool tool that's kind of like your wire cutter where it's specifically set to a certain height on 2 wood pieces and they just cut them. And that's a really cool way to make a slab too. But that's your slab prep. You saw I did the compression on both sides. I added a little water. And in the case of the form that I'm about to make, I am just gonna set this on top. And I need like a perfect, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, but I need a circle, right, to start my base, because whatever your base shape is that you coil off of, it's going to inform the remainder. It's going to reverberate throughout the piece. So whatever shape you choose for your base is going to inform the shape of your piece. So if I did a figure 8, all of a sudden I'm going to have this more like wonky, interesting, more biomorphic shape that emerges. Also the scale of the base is going to dictate how large or small the pot is. In our case, I think I'm requiring like 12-inch height, no smaller than 10-inch. So let's get a little ruler real quick. Oh, that's not very clear. Okay, so like this right here, that's like a 9-inch pot. So, you know, they're like a medium to large size in my opinion. Medium size is probably accurate. Anyways, I'd like to put it on my banding wheel, and I like to create a base that's gonna be about a 3-inch, like a 3-inch-ish. So I'm just kind of looking for that line. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just drawing a guide, and because this is perfectly round, whatever I cut is gonna be perfectly circular. That's just slightly under 3 inches. Maybe, let's see, the bottom of this is 2.5. So I could go in just a little bit more. I'm gonna try and do something kind of small for this demo because there's so many things to demo that if I keep going, it's gonna take forever, quite honestly. So that's quite a petite little base, right? Your excess slab or surplus, if it's a lot of it that you could potentially use for something else, you wanna save it and you don't want it to get too dry. So typically, in addition to my station that I set up, I always have some additional plastic lying to the side. You could just put it on the plastic and then wrap it up in the plastic so it doesn't dry out. So if you're trying to reuse your materials, do consider that. I don't think I'm gonna reuse those, so I'm just gonna pop them back in my bag. I've got my slab base, so now it's time to prepare my coils and go over just like the basics of what a coil is and how to make one. So when I make a coil, or I'm in the process of coil building, some people like to prep a ton of coils and then work from that. I don't like that. They always dry out on me and then I get super frustrated. But what I do like to do is in my bag, for you guys, a lot of y'all will have pieces of clay that are already kind of in a cube. What I do like is I like to get like a rectangular piece of clay or something like this. This is a triangle, but it's gonna do the job. And I like to cut it in half so that each piece is about, what is this? This is about 1 inch large, like an 1-by-1 strip-ish. So I've just got these 1-by-1 strips, and what I'll do is maybe prep like 6 of those or so, and I'll just kind of pop them back in my bag. Whenever you open your bag of clay, you always want to keep it closed so that things don't dry out. But you see I've got like this strip of clay here. It's nothing super uber fancy. For those of you who are getting it out of a rectangular shaped bag, it's definitely going to be more uniform than what I got going on. But this is going to do the job, and that's all that matters. So when I'm prepping the foil that I'm going to work off of, I like to, I'm just setting that aside for now, I like to just squeeze the clay and rotate it and expand it, not on the tabletop, and just kind of get it into a sausage shape. Then I like to, because again, my tabletop is the masonry board or concrete board or whatever you want to call it, it's gonna take a lot of the water out. I like to give this some hydration, and then, you know, even that's a little bit more than I need. I'm always putting my extra clay bits on plastic and not on the concrete board, again, because it's gonna dry it out. We want the bowl to dry out, so that's A-okay. I'll take this coil, and then I like to work center outward for my first initial roll, and then I personally, everyone's different, I like to work left to right, and then sometimes I'll incorporate my other hand. Getting like perfectly round coils is really important to some people. I'm not that person. For me, the coils are just a means to build upward, and I personally don't showcase them. Some people like to showcase the coils. Some people will like twist the coil if it's getting too angular and they want to maintain more of a perfectly rounded coil. They'll kind of twist it. What I like to do if it's getting kind of flat on each edge is I'll just kind of compress it around my fingers, and then I'll just be a lot more gentle with my rolling as I go out to the edge. So if you want a perfectly round coil, you're gonna have to be more gentle. You're gonna have to like assess it as you're going. Like I said, for me, it's just a means to get height. Usually for my coils, like this is good enough for me, honestly. Like, is it fancy? No. Is it gonna do the job? Yes. I also like to flatten my coils out a little bit and pinch them. I like to think of them more as like strips of the wall than a coil, but that's how you roll out a coil. A lot of people will teach that if you go to the bottom part of your finger here to the very tip right here, you want to be using a lot of your hand, and then also too, you want to have your hand be slightly like rounded and utilize that and kind of come out. Pressure also tends to, at the beginning, start at this part of my hand here and then moves towards more pressure on the outer edge. So that's something to consider. I hope that's enough to kind of figure out coils. I have some pre-prepped pieces here, so for me it's gonna feel pretty instinctive to just continue working from the materials I have set to the side. If you are struggling to find a rhythm with coils because you're prepping and then moving back to here and prepping and moving back to here, you could prep a few more and then just make sure you keep them wrapped in plastic. So it's up to you. It's too much responsibility for me to prep too many coils. I can't handle it. So I like to kind of just cut the little edge off, just personal thing. And then you can kind of see the barrel of that. It's not super round, I'm fine with that. Actually, what I like to do personally before I even get going is I like to kind of pinch my coil into more of like a flat strip like that. And then I like to use my serrated rib. I usually have my bucket of water pretty close as well. I like to dip my serrated rib in water, and that way it's almost like I'm creating slip slip on the strip of clay. And you see this wide side and the narrow side. I like to do it on the narrow side because then I'm maximizing and optimizing on the height, right? So if you did it on this wide side and then you're stacking those on top of each other, you're not building height really quickly. And for me, it's important to build height as quickly as possible. So I'm trying to use the tall part of the coil to get that done. After that, I like to score the bottom of my base. So I didn't even tell you what scoring was, did I? I just went into it. Scoring is when you scratch the surface of the material. Anytime you attach the clay to the clay, if that makes any translation. I don't like when, someone once told me they hate when people say, does that make sense? And you know what, upon reflection, like I get it. And so I really try to not say, does that make sense? So instead, did I describe it clearly? I don't know, but anytime you're trying to do this with the clay, stick it together, you want to score in between, okay? So, because if not, it's gonna eventually dislodge itself. Sometimes it happens after it's fired. It can seem like it's secure, but it's not really secure. So scoring is just scratching, is how you can think about it, scratching the surface. The more substantial the piece of clay is to adhere, like if this was like double or triple the thickness and I had a big chunky piece that I was adhering to something a little thinner, I would be even more aggressive than this with my scoring. I'd be using this needle tool and I'd be getting really like deep scratches into it. You want to think of it kind of like Velcro is how I like to describe it. So scoring is really important. You can do it on both sides, or you have to do it on both sides, I should say. And then typically you bare minimum want some water in between them. Ideally you want slip in between them. And then you would put them together and then imagine this side was a handle and this side was the pot. Then it would be nice and sticky and be really hard to get it apart. So as you see with my coils, I am going to be scoring in between each coil that I create. So I'm gonna do this one more time, get it spinning, add that water, score. I already have this scored. And I like to hold the end of the coil, or the beginning of the coil, I don't know how you would think of it. And I like to kind of hold the surplus in my left hand, so I'm holding this with my right. And I like to go, what would this be? I don't know what direction this would be, but towards my right hand. And as I'm placing the coil, I am also pinching it together with my fingers like this and pushing it down. So boop, 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 same time. And then as you go over to the side, you're gonna get to a point where you're gonna connect them. You can connect them in a few different ways. So some people like to cut this one, see how it's kind of at an angle? And then when you marry the other one, y'all can kind of see that edge right there. When you marry them, it's quite seamless and you don't have like a bulge that emerges where the seam is connected. So that is something that a lot of people like to do, myself included. Or if I'm just working more quickly, sometimes I don't actually take the time to do that part. But that's because I'm used to it and it's more automated for me. Yeah. Beyond the scoring in between each coil, you're also going to want to blend them. So remember at the beginning of this, when I talked about your tools, you have this tool here, and what you can do is you can use this little hooked end and you can blend it down. I usually blend the inside down and the outside up, but it's up to you how you want to do that. And it also just depends on how the coil is responding. Sometimes the coil is just gonna try and like unstick itself. As we continue going around with these coils, you'll notice that it becomes a lot more important where my supporting hand is versus where my pressure hand is. So usually when you're creating a form, you always want to be supporting the interior exterior with the opposing force. So like if I was trying to push this inward with my outside hand, I'd be supporting like this. And then vice versa, if I was trying to go out like this, I would support with my outside hand. I hope that was semi-clear too. Okay, I need some more water. Your coils could be a little more delicate if that's just what's coming out. I would say whatever's most comfortable, as long as it's not super bulky. Like, in my opinion, it's just a waste of material if it's super bulky. And for us, and the purpose of what we're doing, we are going to be stacking the coils directly on top of each other. If you have a gap, like your coil's just not big enough, honestly, what I like to do is I like to just take a little dab of clay like this, kind of oval, oblong shape, and then I will just fold it over that, but I'm really meticulous about making sure I pinch the center of it so that there's not any extra material left inside. I'm gonna continue to put my hand on the exterior, bracing it, and then I'm gonna blend those coils down. So we're stacking our coils directly on top of each other. I only have 2 coils here, but already it's becoming important to me to make sure that the shape is what I want. So I didn't mention, as far as tools that are important to me, I did not mention a paddle at the beginning of the video, but a paddle is something that's super important to me that I use a lot, especially in hand building. So I recommend that you get one of those. I have made a few for the studio. This is one of the shapes, or you can even use just a flat piece like this, or like I mentioned, you can use this. It's really up to you. But that was already becoming quite a bit more bulged than what I wanted at the bottom. I'm really trying to go for a conical shape, like cone shape. And so even at this very early stage, because I know that whatever my foundation is going to reverberate throughout, like, I'm gonna take that time. I'm gonna take that time and I'm gonna make sure it's what I want, even now. Even now. So I'm just being a little meticulous. We're gonna go and hit it with some more water on the edge. Boop. Gonna get my next piece of clay. Make myself a better coil this time. Compress it like so. Kind of set it up. I'm setting it up like this in case you can't see it behind me. And I'm just scratching that like so. And then I'm gonna start here. And I would say too, the taller you get and the more delicate maybe you wanna be, less pressure down compared to what you applied at the beginning. Because at the beginning, right, like we're just trying to make sure the base doesn't pop off, because that super sucks when like you've made something that you want to contain water and then all of a sudden you get to it after it's fired and it doesn't hold water because the base fell off and you're just like, ew, ew. That's how you are. That's how I am. Ew. Also, I think I said this, or at least I'm sure you were able to observe it. I always score where the seam is coming together. You know what is one thing that I didn't bring over here that I usually do have also in my tools, along with the paddle, is I usually have a paintbrush. I like to apply either the slip or the water with a paintbrush. So, and I'm also pretty frequently taking water off of my fingertips and letting it absorb into my dough. Some people like to leave the seams visible. That can look really great. There's some amazing artists that do that. There's some beautiful historic pots too that have stunning visible seams. So if you want to do that, I would at least recommend blending the inside, but every once in a while I'll see a seam that I really like and I like to maintain it and leave it visible, and I think it becomes a really beautiful indicator of the process. So that's something to consider. Usually when I am making this form, I either have a drawing of what I'm making or have a model in front of me. And you can also cut out the silhouette of something. And if you have that cut out, you can kind of continually compare the silhouette to the form that you're creating. I think I have one of the videos in your demo or in your assignment detail that has that for you to see, and that can be really helpful guide as you're building upward so that you don't have to do too much editing later on. Like this part you could just fast forward through, because in all honesty, y'all are just gonna need to bear with me while I get a little bit more height on this baby. But I'll try and work in speed. Speed it up. Oh, I suppose something I could talk about. I mean, quiet's nice too. I love quiet. I love quiet, actually. I love listening to music too. I could insert a song in here, but that would also require editing, which I'm like, eh. Although editing is getting pretty easy now with all of these like streamlined Adobe programs for your phone and like your iPad. I was really impressed the last time I used, I think it was like Lightroom. Anyway. Yeah, so like this is pretty crude, but I really do like some of the textures that are developing here, and I am actually liking the seams being visible. Getting eye level with what you're making is super important. So you'll notice me like backing up. I can only back up so far where I'm currently set up, but backing up periodically and kind of seeing where I might need to push out a little more. If I have an indent or a bulge somewhere I don't want it, I can make those assessments as I go. I don't really care what the inside looks like. To me, the visible process is pretty fascinating, and I love looking at archaeological pieces and seeing when they've like cracked open, you can see the inside and the process of the maker. I love that. I feel like there's even room for conversation about like making a contemporary work that references that. And I don't know what you'd comment on, but you can maybe come up with a super cool idea with that as the prompt, or not. I don't know. Ooh, I don't think this is gonna be long enough. I'm gonna need more. I think I'll just fill it in after. As you pinch and it gets taller and you're trying to make those decisions about whether something is going to bow out or if it's gonna roll in, then you have to start thinking about your body mechanics and how they are working. What I mean by that, oh, this is nice and soft. This is better. The other thing was drying out on me, and that was stressing me out a little bit. Now you know. You didn't know, but now you know. I was almost like forgetting to breathe. Okay, I'm just measuring it a little bit. Okay, body mechanics. So once you are starting to need to make different choices regarding if it's bowing out or going in, your body is gonna have to change its angle. So what I mean by that is when you're pinching, right now, my wrist is kind of angled outward, right? So y'all can see I'm trying to move out, right? I'm trying to create this big heel right here, the volume in this kind of tulipy bulby shape. So in order to do that, as I pinch, if I'm pinching vertical like this the whole time with my hand and the angle of it, it's gonna stay cylindrical. If I wanna go cone, I have to think of my body mechanics as being in a conical shape as well. So with that, I am trying to push a little more with my thumb, and my exterior hand is angled outward. Just something for you to think about. You can also switch. A lot of people like to pinch with both of their hands like this. Sometimes it can get really hard on your wrist and on your thumbs to just do it alone. The nice thing about pinching with both of your hands is kind of as you like do this little you're crab walking with your fingers, crab walking around your pot. Here you go, here you go. You can start to feel like I have some chunky spots, and I wouldn't have been able to feel them if I had both of my hands on there. So it is super nice to be able to assess with both of your hands, like where the bulk is versus where it's not. I'm gonna blend it down. Do, do, do. Singing super helps. Oh, the flow state is coming, except for I'm still explaining things to you. I would even say I'm liking this. Can you all see? Like, I think that it's not gonna be exactly this. I bet you anything I kind of go beep, beep, beep. I think that could be kind of cool. The sound effects are important as well. Very, very important. I don't think you'll get the same form if you don't have the sound effects. So But anyways, even at this stage, because I'm kind of seeing my vision emerge, it's time for me to refine the exterior just a bit. If I was really invested in this and something at the bottom was like not going the way I wanted it to, I would even like cut this off, flip it upside down, spend some time with it upside down, figuring out what I want to happen. But I'm okay with it right now. I'm okay with it right now. Instead, I think I'm gonna add one more coil to go outward, and then I think I'm gonna start going inward. Such a long demo. It's probably gonna be like an hour long by the time I'm done. But you know what? I'd just rather have you just take it in sections, like, and I just don't, I was trying to think about how I could arrange it into like separate videos, and I was thinking to myself, oh, well, I could do like tools video, and then I could do stages of clay video, and then by the time I thought about all that, I was like, I'm old, and that sounds like a lot of technology-ing, and I'm sorry, you guys, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it, but I can do this, and I hope that y'all can press pause for me. That is what I'm hoping for. Oopsies, I didn't put enough, and that's okay. And you probably also noticed it didn't score in between. That's because I'm going to compress this so much. And that little dabby that I just put in to fill in is actually super, super, super soft too. So it's gonna be okay. Plus a lot of the stuff I watch lately, I can't even believe, I'm so ashamed of it because I'm like, what does this say about my attention span? But a lot of the things that I watch now, I love watching Netflix on like 1.5 speed and YouTube on 2 speed, and I'm like, what does this say about me? And then I think to myself, oh, I've watched my demos in that speed, it's hilarious. I'm like a little, okay. I like this. You know, this would be a nice little bowl, honestly. This would be a nice little bowl. Looking at it from the side again. Definitely noticing that I have a little, like right here, it has a little dip inward that I'm not loving. So before I lose access to the interior, I'm just gonna swipe from the inside out. That seam that I'm noticing, it's kind of collapsing a bit. On that note, depending on your shape and how you're feeling about it, with coil building, it might be time to take a break. So it's a lot of the time, especially if you're going for like a really ambitiously pushed out form or spherical maybe too, it's sometimes you need to let this sit up and you need to just wait before continuing forward. I'm not gonna do that, but you should if you need to. Instead, what I'm gonna do, because I am noticing a little bit of warping that I think is occurring because of it not drying out. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I am going to bring half of this coil that I was just working with inward. So I have my thumb, I hope you guys can see it, but I have my thumb on the exterior like that. And then I have this piece here and I'm pinching inward, almost like I'm pushing my thumb towards my pointer finger. And then I'm simultaneously supporting the outer edge with my left thumb. So I'm just trying to create, we can call it a little gallery. So I'm trying to create a little gallery edge from which I can continue coiling. And because the gallery that I'm creating is moving inward, I am going to have, right, that like reverberating content that we talked about earlier. I'm gonna have that reverberation throughout what I add to it now too. So that's good, because now what I add is going to go in. We have been just stacking them directly on top. Sometimes it's beneficial to, I think I added a V to beneficial. Sometimes it is beneficial. Sometimes it's beneficial to add, I don't know if this is gonna be enough, but we're gonna try. To add coils instead of stacking them directly on top of each other to either the interior or exterior of the lip of the form. The benefit of that in this case, if I add it not like right, if I were to try and add it right on this edge instead of overlapping it a little bit, it's gonna wanna collapse inward. But if I overlap it on the top of it instead, I'm gonna have more support and I'm gonna be able to continue working my way upward. So let's see if I can describe that. The other thing that I'm gonna do with this, because it is such a gentle edge and because I know I want to move inward quickly and I'm trying to finish this form for y'all, so we can kind of move on. I'm only gonna, this is the exception. If you work fast and you're really compressing a lot, sometimes you don't need to score, but I would recommend scoring. In this case, because I really am trying to just get this moving, I'm not gonna score my main coil and I'm just scoring and adding a little water to the foundational piece and section. And so what I'm doing with this one, I'm trying really hard to curve my hand underneath and not press downward really at all. I'm curling underneath with my fingers like this to support it, and then I'm pushing down with my thumbs kind of like that. So as you observe it, and I am going to do that overlapping maybe 2 more times on this upper edge, just to get it to start moving inward. So at first we were angling out, now we're curling underneath the pot and trying to use both of our hands to essentially push it inward like this. It's a little less hot. The sun is going down, probably because you've been here for 5 million hours. We have no concept of time anymore. It could be 2036 at this point. Just kidding. Okay. I don't think that's enough, but it's okay. Also, at this stage, pretty precarious stuff that I'm trying to do. Especially because like this is such a sensitive spot for collapse, that the thinner your coil could be while still maintaining like actually getting a little bit of movement towards the top, the better. So I'm really trying to, at each of these, press not down, but like squeeze the clay so it's thinner. Ooh, this is gonna be a nice little wonky guy, but good wonky, not like, I didn't mean to do this wonky. Not like the clay owns me. It's a collaboration. So you probably noticed that I haven't been blending the inside yet. I am gonna do that. And I think I'm gonna do that now because it's gonna be harder and harder. So I'm gonna really crouch under here, and I think I'm gonna use the like little hooked end instead. And what I'm gonna do, instead of trying to like go up on this because I don't want it to collapse, is I'm just gonna kind of go to the side. Even a little compression on this seam on the inside is better than nothing. And then you can see with that supporting hand that I mentioned, I'm kind of pressing down and then pushing against it, but it's still mimicking the shape that I hope to end up with in the long run. At this point too, I can see that some of my edge on the shoulder that I'm trying to create is kind of collapsing a little bit. So we're just gonna spend a wee bit of time. I'm kind of pulling this up a bit and I'm paddling. And when I'm paddling, I'm kind of pushing up too. It's almost like I'm lifting the pot very, very gently while paddling too. And then I can even do a baby bit, just a little bit, to reinforce that edge that I'm trying to create. Some people like to use a heat torch, a heat gun, and kind of dry out this edge. I'm gonna use, because we're trying to move a little faster, since it is 2036 and all, and you've been here for 10 years, we're gonna use a torch to just kind of dry out this edge a little bit. I'm gonna hit it. You never want to hit it with the torch in one spot and just hold it there for several minutes, but it's okay to rotate it and give it a little bit of heat right here. It usually goes out when you put it on the inside. If you use a torch, never touch this with your fingers. Never start the torch close to your body. Always start the torch far away from you. Put on the gas until you hear it hissing. Press the ignition, turn the flame down. Even when the flame looks really low, like this is the flame right here that you can see, the flame is really actually way up here. So if I were to hold this here, eventually it's almost started to catch fire. So just be aware that this is really dangerous. And if you're gonna use a torch, be very, very careful. There's no need to like try to be cool with it because it's already cool enough, and safety is way cooler. And like having your eyelashes and stuff like that. That's my opinion. Maybe it's unpopular, but I don't really care. I'm also looking at my form from the top at this point. In all honesty, if I really cared about this pot, I'd take a break. It's time for a break. Like it really, really is, but because I really do want to keep going for y'all, I'm gonna torch it just a little bit more. I'm gonna try and finish it. You know, I lied. I'm gonna torch it a little bit, but then I'm gonna go into, I'll just start demoing slab a little bit for y'all. And I think hopefully that's enough for right now. I think what I'm gonna do as well, because it would be ideal if the bottom of this kind of dried, I'm gonna cut this off of the banding wheel and I'm going to place it over here next to my bowl. I'm also gonna check my bowl. So if you are managing several projects at once, you want to get in the routine of checking them pretty frequently. Like timers are good, I love a timer. I'm pretty sure the people around me hate that I love a timer, but I love a timer. At this stage, what I can feel, and I'll describe to you why I'm actually working with the pot at this point, is I can feel that there's a nice little outer shell. It's dried a little, it's still kind of sticky to the touch, but it's dried a little bit. So at this point, I'm gonna expand it just a little bit more before I set it down, because it's the perfect opportunity to make sure that it's almost to the final thinness that I want. So I'm just spending a teensy bit more time. Also very technical term, teensy bit. Very technical. Very serious. So I'm like and pushing it into my hand. That's better. Flip that upside down, put that right there. Make sure the lip is relatively circular. Okay, let's do a tiny slab demo. This is not going to be really amazing, but I think it'll be good enough to at least describe a few things to you. in all actuality, I think maybe the slab video, I like that you guys are thinking with me right now. I did plan this for your information, but I'm starting to think that maybe the slab video could be a separate video. Can I make this work? I think I can make this work. Let's see what I can do. Let's see what I can do, y'all. Okay, flipping, rolling. I'm gonna need more than that. I'm gonna need this. I think I'm gonna need both of those, but we'll make it separate. In essence, I'm gonna try to make a little tiny soft slab jar with you guys real quick. With slabs, I guess we're doing it. I guess we're doing it, everybody. We got this. Who knows? I'm not gonna lie to y'all. It might go south. It just, might not go well. And we might switch gears. Okay, slab. Luckily the tabletop really does dry these slabs pretty quickly, so I think while I'm pressing this next piece, it's gonna be loud. Loud. You'll notice sometimes if your clay's a little bit softer and you're trying to work on the same spot, it can tend to stick. So this is pretty soft. I just recycled this and needs a second. Anyways, I need a really long, I'm gonna try and make a jar for you guys. So with this jar, essentially it's made of 3 parts. You have a base slab piece, a top slab piece, and a center slab piece. And the way that it opens and closes is with these things called keys that are little cutout pieces. I don't have an example of it right now. The one I have is at the other place that I work at, and so we are just left with descriptors. I'm sure I'll add images to whatever kind of detail you have that will help explain what this looks like. Not in word terms, but in eyeball language. So right now I'm trying to make a piece that's long enough, a slab piece that's long enough. The other thing too, sometimes when you flip your slab like that, if you put it in a wet spot, it will get stuck. So make sure as you are compressing your slab that you put it somewhere dry so it doesn't get stuck. This one might get stuck, I don't know. No, thank goodness. Okay, I was really thinking about it. It was like, I'm going to embarrass you, Vanessa. I said, please don't embarrass me. It hurt me, I think. Okay, I could feel some bumps in there, so I spent a little extra time on that compression because this essentially is gonna wrap around something, and I wanna make sure that it is flexible enough to do that without cracking. So I'm being really meticulous about my compression for that. For this, since I want to make something circular, it can be nice to have an object that you can use to get a perfect circle. I'm just going to make a little tiny circular canister for y'all. I think what I'm going to use is, oh, let's make sure we're recording while we're still over here. Oh, Joy, I think we are. I think we are. Okay, I'm gonna grab an object that I can use. Your pieces are gonna shrink, so this is gonna be pretty tiny by the time it's done. This would be nice for like chili flakes or something like that. For the piece that y'all are gonna make, I would encourage you to be maybe a tiny bit more ambitious with the scale and the design. But like I said, I'm really just trying to show you the basic fundamentals in this video so that you can get going So I have my top and my bottom, like I said, 3 parts. Sometimes, oh, it got stuck. That works. That's one way to do it. Surplus, I might be able to use that for something. For now, we're just gonna set it aside. Every once in a while, I'll just kind of roll it like that. Sometimes if I really want it to be exactly what I'm going for, I'll spend a tiny more time just making sure that circle is the shape that I want. But you're gonna end up manipulating it quite a bit after this process of scoring it together, so it may not benefit you to spend too much time on this meticulousness, but I don't know. I want something the way I want it. And I think intention is so important in art. So those feel a little bit better as far as the thickness of them. That was kind of what I was bothered by, in all honesty. I think what I'm gonna do to really get them exactly how I want them, circular, they're slightly distorted, is I think I'm just going to clean them up a bit. The trick with this is if you're trying to do this on the banding wheel, some people will try to slice it all at once, and you kind of have to very slowly push down and think about yourself cutting through in sections. The pinky on the edge really helps too. So that was probably like 4 or 5 rotations before I actually made contact with the base. But now I have 2 really nice little discs that I'm pretty content with. Again, that's so tiny, right? So my piece here that I'm gonna use, I personally think for a canister this small, jar, whatever you wanna call it, I think maybe, you know, if it's too shallow, it's not gonna hold anything once you cut the lid, and maybe we'll do like, let's do 2.5 inches. Let's do 2 3/4 inches. So I'm marking 2 3/4. I'm gonna do a superficial line right here, and then I'm gonna go to the top of that superficial line and create an additional little indicator mark. And I'm gonna align those 2 indicator marks, and then hopefully it should be 2 3/4 throughout the whole strip. And then if you wanna cut a really straight line on a slab, you can place your ruler on top and then hold your ruler down and then cut along the edge of the ruler, and then you're gonna get a nice strip that's flat. Some people will do the math, right? And they'll use the formula to determine how much length of slab they need. And I think that that is a lovely gesture for someone. And if that someone is you, that's amazing. For me, I don't think in this case I am that someone. I think I am the someone who's going to just place this on top. A lot of people in slab building use templates as well. And I think, you know, in a design course, a template is an extraordinary tool. And I would encourage you to create a template for your box building. It's a really fabulous way to approach design and symmetry and planning too. It gives you a really great plan for yourself. I need to take off maybe a millimeter. That's more than a millimeter, but maybe that was like a 1/16 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just gonna check so y'all can see I have only one seam that's gonna come together. I have my base here. I I don't think, I was going to try and adhere this to my banding wheel. I don't think I'm going to, just because it's such a thin base that if I do, there's the potential that it will cut through the bottom when I do try to remove it. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, just gonna gently place this. There's a tiny bit of water, but not enough to really adhere it. I'm gonna gently place this on to the wheel, and I'm gonna use, again, some water and my scoring tool. I am going to score the seam of this as well. And then I'm not spending a ton of time on compression here right now because I plan to, once it's affixed, to do the base. I'm gonna get a little bit more water and I'm gonna score where it's going to come into contact with this. I'm gonna set it on top. And then, personal preference of mine to maintain the integrity of the cylinder that I've kind of tried to create is I'd like to remove it. And I just like to kind of take it very gently, tap it onto my tabletop until on the interior I start to see a little bit of like slip kind of emerging from the seam on the inside. Then I feel comfortable moving back onto my banding wheel. I like to make sure it's centered at this point. Then I will go in and I will compress this. Oftentimes I switch to this more narrow tool, or even sometimes I'll switch to the back of a paintbrush. I think I'll do that because it's quite narrow. I'm just pushing along the seam while simultaneously rotating. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to add what's called a welding coil. So one of the things that you want to be proficient in and know about with slab building is where we have a seam, if you want to really make sure your connection is good and it's not going to fracture in the firing, you want to add a very small coil. So we talked a little bit about coils earlier, right? Now we're going to apply them as a glue, essentially. Well, it's a weld. Just seemed redundant to say that again, but y'all get it. So I'm going to add a little more water. When I say small coil, I really do mean little. A lot of people will put these like really super chunky coils down. I really like these little tiny welding coils. For a tiny welding coil, whereas we've been using like this part of our hand for the larger coils, I really use more of my palm for a little thin coil. So just keep that in mind. Y'all can see this little guy. I'm gonna take my paintbrush, I'm gonna add some water or slip to the bottom seam and also the interior seam. It's a little harder to get on such a narrow form this coil into the base of this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just kind of letting it drop in there, and I'm gonna use a tool like the back of my needle tool to kind of move it around. I don't know if you all can see inside of there, but it's in there. And I'm just gonna kind of gently place a teeny tiny bit more than I need in here. For this, I'm gonna use the tip of my needle tool because it's kind of stuck in there. And then I can lay that down. Then I'm gonna just kind of, I'm tapping with the back of my needle tool to push into that area, so kind of like that. Then I can move to one of my wooden tools. Probably this one is the best choice. If you can get your finger in there, that's really nice. And essentially what you want to do is, if we'll demonstrate with this here. So if these two edges coming together, we have our welding coil here, right? I hope y'all can see that. this side will go down like that, and this side will go up. So you're doing your best to really wedge that coil into that crease, and more than likely you will not have any tearing apart of the seams if you do that, and it's going to be really super helpful to add those welding coils. Super important with slab building. I think I was going to mention this, but I forgot. So slabs can be used soft like I'm using them now, or you can pre-prep several slabs and you can allow them to dry out a little bit to the leather hard stage that we talked about. And then once they are at that leather stage, what you can do is you can be a lot more structured with your measurements of everything, because it's not going to warp as much. It has quite a bit of stiffness to the form that you can work with, and it holds its shape better. And because of that, you can create really angular geometric pieces that defy the natural softness of this material. Softness when it's plastic, you know. Of course, when it's fired, it's a totally different substance, but at this stage, it tends to have that look to it. But when it dries, you're definitely working with something else. It's a lot more like woodworking. You're not literally working with something else. Okay, so it's come to the exterior part. Y'all can see the seam right here and the one at the bottom. What I'm going to do, I think, for these seams is I'm going to switch to my little rib tool here, and I'm just going to use this heel and a tiny bit of water, and I'm just going to go over that seam. I'm also going to, I think I'm going to use this tool here because it has that nice pointy edge. And I'm going to start by just swiping along the base, just mostly to push that seam into itself. And now all of a sudden, I have something that's quite uniform at the base. I might at this point use a little bit of my paintbrush to blend that. Really ideally going up. I really hope too that you noticed, for me personally, everyone's different, but for me, I like to put the cylindrical part of this on top of the base here and not on the side. So just food for thought while we're kind of working on this. Then I kind of will point underneath here and scrape a little bit of the bottom up just to give it a slightly beveled edge. And then we're going to put the top guy on next. Looks like I have one side that's more angled than the other, so we're going to pay attention to that. I'm going to put the wider end down. All of this material that I just have on the side, I don't know if you guys can see it. That might be past the point of view for you, but if you can see it, I had a bunch of material just sitting on top of plastic. I'm going to put it in my bag now and give it a little spritz so that it doesn't dry out. And I would encourage y'all to do the same thing. And then we're going to put this down, and we're going to give this a little scoring too. You're probably asking yourself, well, you're closing off the form, how are you going to put that welding coil on the interior of this top thing that you're making? Well, eventually we're going to cut this open and in half. We need it to dry out a little before we do that, and I think that's how I'm actually going to divide this video. I think this is going to be part 1, and then part 2 is going to be me finishing all these pieces for you. But like I said, all of these need to dry out a little bit before I'm able to do that. So I'm putting this little top lid on. This is not the lid per se. The lid is going to begin like more down here, and we're either going to just cut it straight across, or we're going to cut into it and then create what are called keys. I'll give a diagram of what that looks like. For now though, I'm just going to spend a little time very slowly rotating this so that there's some pressure on that seam. And then I'm also just going to blend very gently that edge into itself. Might paddle a little more. And then from here, you could do like a fair amount of shaping. Like at this point, it might be good to do a little bit of scraping. And even before you cut into this form to reveal where the lid is gonna be, like I'm gonna work this several more times before it's technically to a point that I'm stopping. But I think that's pretty good for stage one of all three of these things that you're gonna build. Anytime you step away from the material, you always want to wrap it in plastic. So like if you were making this in one session and then you were waiting till the next session, like the video that's coming on, you're going to want to cut this off of your banding wheel. You're going to want to then get a surplus piece of plastic. Let me grab something so that y'all can see what I'm talking about. This is kind of large, which is funny, but you either take one singular piece like this, place it on top, and then you want to make sure there's no openings or seams. So like I folded that all around it and then underneath it, and then set it to the side on one of the shelves that you're using or wherever you store your work. But you want to make sure that you're wrapping things in plastic so they don't dry out. At the beginning of the video, I described to you briefly the stages of clay, right? Plastic, leather soft, leather hard, and then there's bone dry. So with the material, when it's leather and it's still this kind of darker shade of whatever clay body you're using, it still has water content in it. You can still reconstitute it. If it gets to a point where the piece is bone dry, I'm going to show you a piece that I have that's bone dry. When it gets to bone dry, you'll notice the shift in color, right? You see the dark gray versus the light gray. So that's how you know it's bone dry. If you allow your pieces to get bone dry while in process, there is no reconstituting them. If you try to reconstitute them, can you all see in this piece here where it kind of disintegrates? Y'all can see in this piece right here, it disintegrates. If you tried to spray this after it's been bone dry, the structure is not gonna be the same, and you're not gonna be able to work on it anymore. So bone dry clay is really brittle, it's really fragile. So although this can take a little bit of pressure and alteration, like if you were to move this and bump it, you could alter it and fix it. Bone dry, if it cracks off like the lip of your piece, if you just grab your piece haphazard like that when it's bone dry, that's gonna break and we can't fix it. You can, there's a lot of mending paste, but like in my class, I'm gonna probably make you remake it. So if you do have something you love, I would highly encourage you to take good care of it and handle it with care, gentle, never from a precarious spot like this. Cleanup, in case you haven't worked with clay before, clean up the what's the word I want? The solvent, I guess that's the word. Solvent for clay is water. So usually for cleaning, like look, my water, I barely got it dirty. So I can use all of this water to clean my entire station here. I don't know if I'm gonna clean my whole station because I might just take a little breather and then keep recording this video, but large sponges are super helpful for cleanup. And usually what I do, if my water is pretty clean, I start with my hands. I'll just clean my hands a little bit so I've got a fresh start and the stuff that I touch doesn't get dirty again. I usually start by, I never rinse my banding wheel under water, like running water. Instead, I want to use a damp sponge. I want to clean like the sides. I want to clean the bottom, everywhere that had clay on it. I'll set that aside. And then usually I'll just kind of clean all my tools, blah, 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 scrape any extra in there, use my water, clean, clean, clean. And then sometimes when I get to the last bits and bobs of my tools, I'll just kind of scrape the countertop with it. And any extra pieces, I'll either put into a slip container in my bucket to recycle them later. And then your surface of your work area, you want to take your fresh water, and you can use a very generous amount. Don't be trying to clean with this little guy. That's just sad. Get yourself a nice big sponge, lots of water. Wring out the sponge pretty frequently. and go over it 2 times at least. And yeah, take care of your stuff. I think this is a good pausing point. Thanks for sticking with me for all of that time. I hope it was helpful. If I forgot anything, you can ask me later. And yeah, well, stay tuned for part 2, where I will finish this pot. I will show you how to cut this open. I'll show you how to put a foot on here. Thank you so much.